Sometimes the greatest miracles begin in the most broken places. On a dusty road in the middle of nowhere, a struggling single father stops to help a mother and her starving twin daughters, unaware that this simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. This is not just a story about fixing cars or mending broken dreams. It's a story about finding family when you least expect it, and the quiet, stubborn love that builds a home where there once was none. Stay with us, because every chapter brings you closer to a miracle stitched together with hope, heart, and second chances. If you believe in the power of kindness, love, and second chances, we invite you to join our community. Hit the subscribe button and be part of a journey where ordinary moments lead to extraordinary miracles. Now let's begin the story. The Turner Garage had once been the pride of Highway 21, a small but proud fixture in a town so tiny most maps didn't bother naming it. Now it sat like a forgotten relic, peeling white paint, a crooked sign that read Turner Garage, Estorner 1971, and a gravel parking lot overrun with weeds. Inside, the air smelled of engine grease, sun-warmed leather, and the heavy, sweet dust that only time could lay down. Cole Turner wiped his hands on an old shop towel and leaned against the workbench, surveying the skeleton of a 1967 Mustang he had been rebuilding for months. It wasn't just a car. It was a silent promise he kept to himself, a way of keeping old dreams breathing even when everything else around him had gone still. Behind him, in the farthest corner of the garage, sat a boy, a thin figure hunched over a battered notebook, pencil scratching quietly across the page. Ben, 8 years old, Cole's son, and the center of a world that had otherwise collapsed 2 years ago when death took too much, too soon. Ben didn't speak much these days. Some mornings, he wouldn't even look up when Cole placed breakfast on the table. The boy lived inside his sketches, intricate drawings of cars, engines, and sometimes, if you looked close enough, a small house with smoke curling from its chimney. A home that existed nowhere but in pencil lines and quiet hope. Cole turned back to the Mustang and ran a hand along its dusty hood. The town folks said he was wasting his time. They said there was no point fixing up an old car when there weren't even customers left to admire it. But they didn't understand. This wasn't about business. It was about proving, to himself, to Ben, to the empty spaces where laughter used to live, that some things could be rebuilt, even when everything told you it was easier to let go. A hot wind pushed through the open garage doors, carrying the scent of dry sage and faraway rain. Cole wiped his brow and stared down the empty stretch of Highway 21. Nothing but dust devils and the low hum of cicadas. Summer in Nevada. He sighed and glanced at the clock nailed crookedly above the doorway. 2:45 p.m. Almost time to deliver the 1965 Mustang to a collector out by Carson City. A rare good payday if he could get the car running smooth enough to make the trip. He hated leaving Ben alone, even for a few hours. But Mrs. Hadley from the diner down the road had promised to check in. Still, Cole's gut twisted. Ben didn't trust many people anymore. Truth be told, neither did Cole. He pulled off his work gloves and grabbed the keys from the nail by the door. The Mustang purred to life on the first try. A small, stubborn miracle. Cole allowed himself a rare smile. Small victories, he thought. You took them where you could. Before he left, he walked over to Ben, kneeling to meet the boy's distant gaze. "Hey, champ," he said softly. "I'll be back before dark. Mrs. Hadley's just next door if you need anything." Ben nodded, a slight movement barely noticeable unless you were watching for it. Cole squeezed the boy's shoulder, wishing, praying for more, but knowing better than to push. As he backed the car carefully out of the garage, he caught one last glance at the place. Sunbeams cut through the dust in golden ribbons, lighting up the cluttered workbenches, the oil stains on the floor, and Ben, small and serious, hunched over his notebook. It looked for just a second like a postcard from a forgotten America, where hard work and heartache intertwined in quiet dignity. The drive stretched out long and lonely. The road shimmered under the desert heat. Cole adjusted the rearview mirror and caught his own reflection. Lined face, sun-creased skin, gray flecking his temples. Not so different from the garage itself. Weathered, worn, but still standing. Halfway down Highway 21, he spotted movement up ahead. A battered old station wagon pulled off to the side, its hood up, steam curling into the air like a distress signal. Beside it, a woman waved frantically, her other arm clutching two little girls to her sides. Cole's heart sank. He eased the Mustang onto the shoulder and climbed out, the door creaking in protest. The woman was young, early 30s maybe, her jeans dusty, a threadbare t-shirt clinging to her frame. The girls were even smaller than Ben had been when life first knocked him sideways. Twins, wide-eyed, hungry-looking. The woman's voice cracked when she spoke. "Please, we've been stuck here for hours. We don't have any water left, and the girls haven't eaten since yesterday." Cole didn't need to hear more. Something in her face, defiant but desperate, cut through every guarded instinct he had built since the world taught him to be careful. He nodded once. "Pop the hood," he said gruffly, and he glanced at the girls, who clung to her legs like saplings in a storm. "Let's get them some shade." She hesitated for a heartbeat, then reached into the car, pulling out a ratty backpack. The girls clung to her hands as they stepped carefully into the slice of shadow thrown by the Mustang. Cole leaned over the engine of the station wagon. Boiled dry. He could fix it, probably, if he had an afternoon and parts he didn't carry in his back pocket. But it wasn't the car that needed fixing most urgently. "You folks from around here?" he asked. The woman shook her head. Her voice, when it came, was steady but brittle. "Just trying to get somewhere better." A beat of silence passed between them, thick and humming with things unsaid. Cole wiped his hands on his jeans, glanced back toward town. The garage, Ben waiting, the empty house with its two quiet rooms. "All right," he said finally. "Let's get you all somewhere safe first. Then we'll figure the rest out." The woman blinked rapidly, fighting tears she clearly didn't want to show. "Thank you," she whispered. Cole grunted, leading her and the girls toward the Mustang. As they climbed in, he caught the smallest of smiles from one of the twins, the kind of smile that doesn't know how to fake anything yet. And for the first time in a long while, Cole felt it. A shift, small, subtle, but real. Maybe, just maybe, some things weren't beyond repair after all. The ride back to Turner Garage was a quiet one, filled only with the hum of the Mustang's engine and the soft, uneven breathing of the two little girls in the back seat. They were holding hands tightly, as if afraid the world might try to pry them apart if they loosened their grip for even a second. Sarah, the woman's name he had learned as she slid cautiously into the passenger seat, kept her gaze pinned to the horizon. Her hands trembled in her lap, fingers twisting the frayed strap of her backpack. Cole drove with one eye on the road and the other flicking toward her every so often, cataloging the signs of exhaustion, the silent calculation etched into the hard set of her jaw. She was used to fighting alone. That much was clear. It wasn't his place to ask questions. Not yet. Still, he found himself wondering, where had she come from? What kind of world had turned this woman and her two tiny girls into refugees on the side of a forgotten highway? The Mustang rumbled over the dusty road, past sun-bleached fields and crumbling fence posts. Out here there weren't many second chances. You either made do with what you had, or you didn't make it at all. When they pulled into the gravel lot of the garage, Ben was exactly where Cole had left him, sitting cross-legged near the workbench, his notebook balanced carefully on his knees. He didn't look up right away, but Cole saw the subtle tightening of his shoulders, the way his pencil paused mid-sketch. Ben noticed everything. He just didn't always know what to do with what he noticed. Cole parked the Mustang and turned off the ignition. Dust settled around them like a fine mist. "We'll get you sorted," he said gruffly to Sarah. "You and the girls. It's not much, but it's safe." Sarah nodded. Her eyes glistening with a sheen of unshed tears, she refused to blink away. She helped the twins out of the car, one girl clutching a battered teddy bear, the other dragging a torn blanket that had seen better decades. Ben watched from his perch, silent and wary. Cole crouched down to the twins' level. "You two hungry?" he asked gently. They nodded in perfect unison. He gestured toward the garage's side door. "There's a little kitchen through there. Got some beans and bread. Maybe a slice of pie if Mrs. Hadley left anything behind." Sarah hesitated, glancing back at Cole as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. When none came, she guided the girls through the door with a soft, murmured "thank you" that seemed to cost her more pride than she could afford. Cole followed after a moment, walking past Ben without needing to say a word. Ben closed his notebook and trailed behind, his bare feet making no sound on the concrete floor. The kitchen was about as plain as kitchens came. A battered Formica table, 4 mismatched chairs, a stove older than Cole himself, and a humming refrigerator that sounded like it was contemplating retirement. Still, there was food, and right now, that was a luxury. Cole opened a can of baked beans and dumped them into a pot without ceremony. He found a half loaf of bread on the counter and set it out, slicing it thick, the way his mother used to do on Sunday afternoons. He moved with quiet efficiency, conscious of the small eyes watching him from the table. Ben stood stiffly in the doorway, clutching his notebook like a shield. He hadn't said a word yet, but he hadn't fled either, a small miracle in itself. When the food was ready, Cole ladled beans into bowls, placed a slab of bread on each plate, and set them down in front of the girls. He caught a glimpse of their faces, the way they tried to mask their hunger out of politeness, the way their hands trembled slightly as they gripped the spoons. Sarah sat last, her posture rigid, her fingers white-knuckled around the bowl. "You're safe here," Cole said quietly, more to her than to the girls. For a moment she didn't respond. Then she lowered her head, shoulders sagging as if some unbearable weight had finally slipped from her back. The girls ate with a fierce, almost mechanical determination, not wasting a drop. Ben drifted closer, hovering near the table, his eyes darting between the twins and his father. Cole pulled a chair out and gave him a small nod. Ben hesitated. Then, slowly, awkwardly, he sat down. It wasn't much. It wasn't laughter or conversation or even trust. But it was something. And in a place like Turner Garage, where the walls echoed too often with silence, something was everything. After the girls finished eating, Sarah helped them wipe their hands with damp cloths Cole found in a drawer. The sun was starting to sink, throwing long golden shafts of light through the dusty windows. "I'll take a look at your car tomorrow," Cole said, leaning against the counter. "Tonight you and the girls can stay here. Got a couple of spare cots in the back office. Not fancy, but better than the roadside." Sarah opened her mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to insist they didn't want charity. But then her gaze landed on the twins, curled up together on one of the chairs, their faces slack with the bone-deep exhaustion only children could wear so openly. She closed her mouth and nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. Cole inclined his head. No need for speeches. Out here, kindness didn't come with price tags or conditions. It came because one day You might be the one stuck on the side of the road." He turned to Ben, who was now sketching something new. A Mustang, maybe, or a dream only he could see. "Come on, kiddo," Cole said. "Let's get their beds set up." Ben looked at him, really looked at him for the first time all day, and then, without a word, he stood, closing his notebook with a soft thump. As they set up the cots together, working side by side in the fading light, Cole felt something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. It wasn't loud. It didn't shout or blaze like a firework. It was small, quiet, but it was real. And sometimes out here where the world forgot to look, that was more than enough. Morning came slow to Turner Garage. Sunlight slipped through the cracked windows, painting long rectangles of gold across the concrete floor. The air smelled of warm metal, old dust, and something sweeter. Something that hadn't lingered here for a long time. Life. Cole stirred from the battered recliner he had dragged into the garage years ago. His back ached. His shoulder complained. But for once he didn't mind. He rubbed his eyes and listened. There it was again. The small, precious sounds he hadn't heard in too long. Children. Not crying. Not shouting. Just being. The soft giggles of the twin girls floated in from the office, punctuated by the occasional creak of springs as they bounced on the old cots. Sarah's voice followed, low and warm, corralling them with a kind of tired affection that made Cole's chest tighten. He swung his legs off the recliner and stood, the floor cool against his bare feet. Across the room, Ben was already awake, perched at the kitchen table with his sketchbook. The boy was drawing with a quiet intensity, his small fingers smudged with graphite. Cole watched him for a moment, marveling again at how Ben had changed since yesterday, how the arrival of two giggling, stubborn little girls had nudged something loose inside his boy's heart. It was fragile still, like a baby bird testing its wings. But it was there, and that was enough. Cole moved to the stove, setting a battered coffee pot to percolate. The smell of brewing coffee soon filled the room, thick and comforting. He rummaged through the cupboard, found a few more cans of beans, and decided it would have to do for breakfast. Maybe Mrs. Hadley could spare some eggs later if he made the trip. He heated the beans slowly, stirring them with an old wooden spoon that had belonged to his mother. The girls shuffled into the kitchen first, their hair wild with sleep, dragging their blanket between them like a shared shield. Sarah followed, her face pale but composed. Cole served them bowls of beans and slices of thick bread, cut from the loaf he had saved. Ben watched the girls eat with quiet fascination, as if still trying to decide whether they were real or just another of his sketches come to life. Sarah sat across from Cole, her fingers curled around a chipped mug of black coffee. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, though. It felt companionable, like two people sharing a front porch swing, content just to exist in the same space. Finally, Sarah cleared her throat. "I can pay you back," she said, voice low but steady. "I mean, not right now, but I can work, clean, cook, whatever you need." Cole shook his head slowly. "You don't owe me anything," he said simply. "Sometimes people just need a little breathing room." Sarah blinked at him, and for a moment Cole thought she might cry. But she swallowed it down, lifting her chin in a stubborn, almost defiant gesture. "I'm not used to handouts," she said. "Neither am I," Cole replied. "That's why this isn't one." He nodded toward the garage bay, where the Mustang skeleton waited under a tarp. Could always use a second set of hands. Sarah followed his gaze and let out a soft, surprised laugh. "I don't know a thing about cars," she admitted. Cole smiled, the expression rare and unpracticed. "You'll learn." The girls finished eating, and after a few whispered consultations, decided the most important thing in the world was to explore every inch of Turner Garage. Ben shadowed them silently at first, his notebook clutched to his chest like armor. But soon enough, curiosity got the better of him. Cole watched as Ben showed the girls the old tool cabinets, the hoist that hadn't worked properly in years, even the secret stash of candy bars he kept in the bottom drawer of his desk. Lily and June, unfazed by the dust and clutter, treated each discovery as a treasure beyond price. When Ben finally laughed, a soft, startled sound like the first chime of a distant bell, Sarah turned sharply toward Cole, her hand flying to her mouth. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. They both understood the weight of that moment. It wasn't just a laugh. It was a crack in the armor, a sign that maybe, just maybe, the boy who had been locked away inside himself was finding his way back. As the morning stretched into afternoon, Cole and Sarah worked together in the garage bay. Cole showed her how to sand rust off fenders, how to check for cracks in the engine block, how to handle the old tools with the respect they demanded. Sarah was a quick study, her hands nimble, her brow furrowed in concentration. There was something familiar about her, something that spoke of hard times survived and dreams buried deep, but not dead. When the sun was high overhead, Cole called a break. He pulled out a dusty ice chest from under the counter and found a couple of root beers, still cool enough to drink. They sat side by side on the tailgate of an old pickup truck parked outside, sipping in silence. Ben, Lily, and June played in the dirt nearby, building elaborate forts from scrap wood and hubcaps. Sarah stared out at the vast, empty horizon. "Thank you," she said again, so quietly Cole almost missed it. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched the children, their laughter rising into the bright, unforgiving sky. "You don't have to keep thanking me," he said finally. "Helping people, that's just what we're supposed to do. Somewhere along the line, we all forgot that." Sarah turned her head, studying him with an intensity that made him shift slightly under her gaze. "You're a rare breed, Cole Turner," she said softly. He shrugged. "Just stubborn mostly." But deep down, he knew stubbornness had nothing to do with it. It was hope. It was believing that even out here, in the dust and ruin, good things could still grow. Maybe even miracles. Evening in Turner Garage carried a kind of peace you couldn't buy anywhere else. The sun melted behind the distant hills, leaving the sky streaked with orange, pink, and fading blue. The air cooled just enough to lift the dust from the ground and let it dance like gold threads in the waning light. Cole leaned against the frame of the garage bay, arms crossed loosely over his chest, watching the kids with a quiet, almost sacred satisfaction. Ben, Lily, and June were crouched near an old tire pile, huddled over a game that only they seemed to understand. Their heads bent close together, their laughter rising and falling like birdsong in the dusk. For the first time in years, the garage wasn't silent. And that, Cole thought, was the real miracle. Sarah had disappeared into the storage room earlier, searching for blankets and pillows. Cole heard a clatter, followed by a soft curse under her breath. He pushed off the doorframe and made his way inside, curious. The storage room was a cluttered time capsule. Crates of forgotten parts, shelves sagging under the weight of dusty manuals, and tucked away in the farthest corner, a battered leather trunk Cole hadn't opened in more than a decade. He found Sarah kneeling by the trunk, her hands covered in dust, a peculiar smile tugging at her lips. "Hope you don't mind," she said, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "I found some extra blankets. And this." She held up a boxy old Polaroid camera, the kind Cole remembered his father using, back when taking a photograph still felt like catching a piece of magic. Cole chuckled low in his throat. Thought that thing died years ago. Sarah inspected it, tilting it back and forth. Looks like it just needs a little love. Mind if I try it? He shrugged, feeling the strange warmth of nostalgia settle into his bones. Be my guest. Outside, the sky deepened into twilight, the first stars beginning to prickle the vast expanse above. The kids were still playing, their energy seemingly endless, their imaginations boundless. Sarah fiddled with the camera, slapped the side once for good measure, then peered through the viewfinder. All right, everybody, gather up, she called. Lily and June immediately scampered toward her, Ben following more slowly, hesitant. Sarah knelt down to their level, adjusting them like little figurines. Ben in the middle, Lily on one side, June on the other. The girls wrapped their arms around Ben without hesitation, and to Cole's amazement, Ben didn't pull away. He looked stiff, uncertain, but there was something else there too, something unfurling in his guarded heart. Say cheese, Sarah coaxed. 3 small voices blended into one ragged chorus, and Sarah pressed the button. The Polaroid clicked, whirred, and spit out a white square. Sarah fanned it carefully, watching as the image began to bleed into life. When the colors finally bloomed on the glossy surface, even Cole had to catch his breath. There they were, 3 children tangled in an imperfect, beautiful knot of arms and smiles. The dusty Mustang in the background, the setting sun crowning them like angels in a forgotten cathedral. Sarah held the photo out to Cole with a gentle smile. You should keep this, she said. Cole took it, cradling the picture like something fragile and irreplaceable. He didn't speak. Couldn't, really. The lump in his throat was too thick. Instead, he walked back into the garage, found a battered corkboard above the workbench, and pinned the photo there, right in the center where it couldn't be missed. A new beginning, captured in a single heartbeat. Later that night, after the girls had curled into each other on their cot and Ben had fallen asleep, clutching his sketchbook, Cole and Sarah sat side by side outside the garage, their chairs tilted back, their boots resting on an overturned crate. The stars overhead stretched out like spilled sugar, endless and shimmering. Cole tipped his head back, letting the coolness of the night wash over him. It's been a long time since this place felt alive, he murmured. Sarah sipped from an old enamel mug filled with weak coffee and nodded. You built something good here, she said. Cole huffed a dry laugh. Built it for a life that doesn't exist anymore. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, maybe it's not about building a life. Maybe it's about building moments. Good ones. Enough of them strung together. Maybe that's all life really is. Cole turned to look at her, the lines around his eyes softening. You always talk like that? He asked, a trace of a smile tugging at his mouth. She smiled back, the edges of her weariness softening for the first time. Only when I'm running low on sleep. They sat in comfortable silence after that, listening to the occasional creak of the garage cooling in the night air, the soft breathing of children through the open windows. Before they turned in, Sarah wandered back into the garage, returning a few minutes later with the Polaroid in hand. She had taken another photo. It was a shot of the garage itself. Turner Garage, Est, 1971, with the light from the windows spilling onto the dusty lot, the Mustang's gleaming hood just barely visible through the open bay door. Sarah pinned it next to the first photo, the children's photo, and under it, in shaky but determined handwriting, she scrawled, Home isn't a place. It's the people who believe in you. Cole stood back and stared at the 2 photographs for a long time after Sarah had gone inside. The garage was still battered. The Mustang was still a long way from finished. Ben still had scars no one could see. But maybe, just maybe, they were starting something that mattered more than any of that. Maybe they were building something new, something you couldn't lose. Not ever again. The morning light poured into Turner Garage like a slow-moving river, soft and golden, brushing everything it touched with a kind of reverence. The dust motes floated lazily through the air, caught in sunbeams that made the old place look almost sacred. Ben sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, sketchbook balanced on his knees, a stub of pencil working steadily across the page. Every so often he would glance up, watching the twins as they plotted some grand adventure among the abandoned tires and spare parts. Cole leaned against the doorframe, a chipped coffee mug cradled in his hands, his heart strangely full. He could feel it, that slow thaw, that cautious creeping hope that maybe, just maybe, they were all finding their way back to the world. Sarah appeared beside him, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "They're good for him," she said quietly. Cole nodded. "They're good for all of us. After breakfast, more beans, more bread, with the promise of better fare once they made it to town. Lily and June discovered the old bicycle. It was a relic even by Turner Garage standards. Rusted frame, sagging tires, paint peeling away in jagged scars. Cole had meant to haul it off years ago, but had never found the heart to do it. The twins dragged it into the middle of the yard like pirates, uncovering buried treasure. Ben watched from the steps, his pencil forgotten on the ground. Lily and June knelt around the bicycle, conferring in whispers, while Sarah rifled through a box of odds and ends and emerged with a length of bright red ribbon, frayed at the edges but still vibrant. She handed it to the girls with a wink. "Every good bike needs a little magic," she said. The twins giggled and set to work, tying the ribbon around the handlebars, the frame, even the battered seat until the whole thing looked like some kind of whimsical chariot. When they were done, they stepped back, beaming. Ben edged closer, curiosity pulling him forward despite himself. Lily held out the bike like an offering. Ben shook his head, stepping back, fear flickering across his face. But June, with the infinite patience only a child could muster, walked up and gently placed the ribbon-tied handlebars in Ben's hands. "You can do it," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. Cole held his breath from the doorway. He had tried before, God knew he had tried, to get Ben back on a bike, back into the sunlight, back into life. Each time had ended with tears, silence, walls built higher and thicker. But this was different. This was friendship, pure and uncalculated. Ben gripped the handlebars tighter. His knuckles went white. He set one foot on the pedal, wobbled dangerously and nearly toppled. Lily darted forward, steadying him. June clapped her hands and shouted encouragement. Sarah moved to stand beside Cole, her hand brushing his lightly, grounding him. Ben tried again, and this time he moved. Just a few feet, awkward, jerky, uncertain, but he moved. The twins ran beside him, laughing and cheering, and Ben's face, taut with concentration, cracked open into a grin so wide, so fiercely bright, that Cole had to blink hard against the sudden sting in his eyes. Ben laughed. A real laugh, rich and ringing and utterly free, and Cole felt something inside him break wide open. Not grief, not fear, joy, pure and sharp and unexpected. He heard Sarah's breath hitch beside him, and knew she was feeling it too, that rare, precious miracle of watching a wounded heart choose to live again. When Ben finally skidded to a halt, tumbling sideways into a heap, the girls pounced on him, squealing with triumph. Ben sat up, brushing dirt from his jeans, and looked at Cole. For the first time in 2 long, aching years, he smiled straight at his father. Cole swallowed hard. "Good job, champ," he said, his voice rough. Ben ducked his head, embarrassed but glowing. The twins helped him up, chattering excitedly about races and obstacle courses they were going to build. Sarah bent down and retrieved the red ribbon, now dirty and trailing in the dust. She wound it loosely around her wrist, a quiet reminder of what had just happened. "Never underestimate the magic of a little red ribbon," she murmured, smiling. Cole chuckled, the sound unfamiliar in his own throat. "I think it had a lot more to do with the company he kept." Sarah looked at him then, really looked, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the 2 of them. 2 battered souls standing in the middle of a forgotten place, watching hope take root in the most unlikely soil. That night, after supper, when the children were dozing in a tangle of limbs on the cots, Sarah sat with Cole on the old wooden steps outside the garage. The stars above them were endless, sharp as diamonds against the velvet dark. Sarah fiddled with the ribbon still tied around her wrist, her fingers tracing lazy patterns. "You know," she said softly, "I spent a long time thinking that once something was broken, it stayed that way." Cole leaned back, the creak of the step familiar under his weight. "Yeah," he said, "I know that feeling." Sarah twisted the ribbon once, twice. "But maybe," she said, almost to herself, "maybe it's not about putting things back the way they were. Maybe it's about finding a new way to fit the pieces together." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's what a good mechanic does. You don't always have the perfect parts. Sometimes you gotta improvise, weld things stronger at the broken places." Sarah laughed, low and warm. "I like that," she said, "welding the broken places." They sat together, the silence between them full of possibilities. Inside, the children stirred in their sleep, safe and whole and utterly unaware of the miracle they had set in motion. And out under the boundless Nevada sky, Cole Turner realized he wasn't just fixing old Mustangs anymore. He was fixing something far more valuable. He was fixing home. The next morning dawned with the kind of golden brilliance that made even the battered Turner garage look almost handsome. The garage doors stood wide open, letting in the warm breath of summer, and somewhere overhead, a lonely hawk circled lazily in the endless blue sky. Cole leaned over the Mustang's chassis, hands deep in grease and determination. The 1967 Fastback had sat idle for too long. Its body was rusted through in patches, its heart, the engine, silent and reluctant. But something had shifted inside Cole since the night before, since Ben's laughter, and the red ribbon fluttering like a battle flag against the sky. Maybe the car didn't have to be perfect. Maybe nothing did. Maybe it just needed to run again. Like them. Inside the garage, Sarah sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, a large piece of butcher paper spread out before her. Ben knelt beside her, clutching a freshly sharpened pencil, his tongue poking out the corner of his mouth in concentration. Lily and June hovered nearby, offering spirited advice about flames down the sides and cool secret compartments for snacks. Sarah smiled, patient and endlessly encouraging. They were designing their Mustang, not just restoring it, reimagining it. "Tell me what you'd want it to look like," Sarah said, tapping the paper with the pencil. "This is your car, too." Ben hesitated, the pencil poised mid-air. Then he began to draw. Slow at first, tentative, but then with growing boldness. Sweeping lines, bold curves, fierce angles. Cole watched from a distance, pretending to be absorbed in the engine. But every few seconds his gaze flicked toward them. Ben, who had once barely spoken above a whisper, now animatedly explained the differences between fastbacks and coupes, about the importance of weight distribution, about how red wasn't just a color, it was a feeling. Sarah listened like he was revealing the secrets of the universe, and in a way he was. Hours slipped past unnoticed. Sarah and Ben filled the paper with dream after dream. A Mustang with a deep cherry red paint job, black racing stripes, and a dashboard lined with small personalized engravings. Little stars, initials, and even a tiny sketch of a dinosaur. For good luck, June insisted. Lily lobbied hard for rainbow headlights. Ben solemnly promised to consider it. Cole chuckled under his breath. Maybe it wasn't the car restoration the purists at the county fair would expect, but it was a restoration of something much more important. A family. A future. Later, as the sun began its slow arc toward the western hills, Cole called everyone together. He unrolled an old blueprint he had kept tucked away, a schematic of the 1967 Mustang's original factory build. Side by side, they compared the factory lines to the wild, imaginative design Ben and the girls had created. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was glorious. Cole tapped the drawings with a calloused finger. "All right," he said gruffly. "If we're going to do this, we do it right, piece by piece." Ben's eyes lit up, and Lily clapped her hands. Even June, who had grown momentarily distracted chasing a moth, ran over, her hair flying like a wild halo around her face. Sarah looked up at Cole, her smile quiet but fierce. In that moment, Cole realized something vital. It wasn't about restoring what was lost. It was about building something new, out of broken parts, out of stubborn hope, out of pencil sketches on old butcher paper. It was about forging a miracle with their own hands. The next few days became a rhythm, a dance of sorts. In the mornings, Cole and Sarah worked on the Mustang, teaching the kids everything from sanding down rust to measuring the angles of the frame. Ben proved to be a natural with the smaller, detailed work. The girls excelled at painting, taping, and somehow convincing Cole to allow tiny decorative stars on the underside of the dashboard. "No one will see them," Lily reasoned. Every night they gathered under the stars, eating simple dinners of grilled cheese, tomato soup, and whatever scraps Cole and Sarah could pull together. And every night, Sarah pulled out the old Polaroid and snapped another photo, capturing greasy hands holding wrenches, beaming faces streaked with dust, and dreams slowly taking shape under the wide Nevada sky. One evening, as Cole wiped the sweat from his brow and surveyed the day's work, Sarah appeared beside him, holding one of the photos. She handed it to him silently. It showed Ben perched on the hood of the half-assembled Mustang, holding a wrench in one hand and giving a shy, crooked smile to the camera. Cole stared at it for a long time. "He's coming back," Sarah said softly. "Because of you." Cole shook his head. "No," he said. "Because of them. Because of you." Sarah tucked her hair behind her ear, her cheeks flushing slightly under the setting sun. "We all needed each other," she whispered, "more than we ever knew." For a moment, they stood there, shoulder to shoulder, the hum of cicadas rising around them like a benediction. The Mustang gleamed dully in the twilight, not finished yet, but alive in a way that no amount of chrome and polish could ever manufacture. Just like them, still battered, still flawed, but alive, and building something better. The sun dipped behind the hills, leaving the sky brushed in dusky purples and soft grays. One by one, the stars began to blink awake, scattered like spilled sugar across the wide Nevada night. Cole leaned back in an old lawn chair outside the garage, feeling the coolness of the earth seep up through his boots. Sarah sat beside him, a heavy old quilt draped across her lap. The girls snuggled into her sides, half asleep, but determined not to miss a single star. Ben sat cross-legged near the front steps. his sketchbook abandoned for once, his face tilted up to the sky. It had become their tradition, these nights under the open heavens. After days spent sanding, welding, and dreaming together over the Mustang, they would gather outside, breathing in the cool night air and letting the fatigue of the day settle into something softer, something almost holy. Sarah shifted slightly, nudging the twins to keep them from sliding off the quilt completely. "All right," she said, voice low and playful. "Everyone gets one wish tonight, one dream." Lily sat up first, her hair wild and backlit by the faint glow from the garage. "I wish," she declared, "for a giant treehouse, with slides and secret tunnels, and maybe a hot chocolate machine." June giggled and clapped her hands. "Me too," she added quickly. "But mine has a puppy that never grows old." Sarah laughed, brushing a kiss across the tops of their heads. Ben was quieter, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. Cole watched him, careful not to push. Finally, Ben spoke, his voice small but clear. "I wish," he said slowly, "for our Mustang to win. Not because it's the fastest, but because it's ours." Cole felt a lump rise in his throat. He cleared it roughly and reached for the battered coffee thermos at his feet, buying himself a moment. Sarah caught his eye over the top of the twins' heads and smiled, a smile that said she understood every word he couldn't quite get out. When it was Sarah's turn, she looked thoughtful, her fingers tracing slow patterns on the quilt. "I wish," she said finally, "that we find a place where no one ever has to leave again unless they want to." Her words floated into the night like a prayer, tender and raw. The girls leaned closer into her sides, sensing without fully understanding the gravity beneath the wish. Cole felt it too, that deep, aching hunger for permanence, for belonging, for a place that didn't come with expiration dates or broken promises. The stars overhead pulsed gently, ancient and indifferent. Maybe they had seen too many wishes rise and fall to pay much mind to this one, but Cole made his own silent vow anyway. If it was within his hands, these hands that had fixed engines, mended broken axles, and held his son through countless storms, he would build that place for them, brick by brick, promise by promise. The night grew deeper, the air crisper. Sarah tucked the girls closer, their eyelids drooping, their small bodies sagging with the full, contented exhaustion only children knew. Ben dozed too, his head resting lightly against the wooden step, the sketchbook still by his side like a loyal dog. Cole stood slowly, stretching out the stiffness from a long day's work. Without a word, he bent and lifted Ben into his arms. The boy feather-light but solid, real, alive. Sarah rose carefully, gathering the twins, one in each arm, her movements instinctive, protective. Together they carried the sleeping children inside. Inside the garage, the cot beds waited under the makeshift shelter of heavy tarps hung from the rafters. A poor man's cabin, but it had a kind of rough magic about it. Cole laid Ben down gently, pulling a faded blanket over him. Ben murmured something in his sleep, but didn't wake. Sarah settled the girls, tucking the quilt tight around them, brushing their cheeks with the backs of her fingers. For a moment, Cole just stood there, watching them. The garage, once hollow and echoing, was now filled with soft breathing, the scent of shampoo and sun-warmed skin, the slow heartbeat of family. Outside again, under the endless sky, Cole and Sarah sat close on the front steps. This time, Sarah didn't leave space between them. She leaned her shoulder lightly against his, and he let himself lean back, resting into the simple, breathtaking comfort of another human being. "You think the Mustang will be ready in time?" she asked, her voice a low murmur. Cole considered it. "We'll make it ready," he said. Sarah smiled, a small, tired, but fiercely hopeful thing. "You always sound so sure." Cole chuckled quietly. "I've learned," he said. "Sometimes the only difference between fixing something and losing it forever is believing you can." Sarah was silent for a long time after that. Then, very softly, she said, "You saved us." The words hit Cole harder than any hammer blow. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You saved yourselves. I just opened the door." The stars spun slowly above them, vast and unchanging. Below them, in the dusty cradle of Turner Garage, something small but indestructible had begun to take root. It wasn't built of chrome or horsepower, or even dreams drawn in pencil. It was built of laughter and red ribbons and the steady, stubborn love that asked for nothing but gave everything. And under those stars, Cole Turner allowed himself, for the first time in a long time, to believe that maybe the future wasn't something he had lost. Maybe it was something he was building right here, right now, piece by piece, heartbeat by heartbeat. The days that followed stitched themselves into a rhythm, steady, sure, and filled with the kind of quiet purpose that made the heart ache in the best way. Sunlight spilled across the concrete floor each morning, waking the garage with its golden fingers. By mid-morning, Turner Garage buzzed with life. The clatter of wrenches, the soft hum of the sanding block, the laughter of 3 children weaving through the dust motes like sun sprites. It wasn't perfect work. The sanding was uneven. The paint was patchy in places where small, eager hands had insisted on helping. But it was theirs. Piece by piece, the old Mustang came back to life. The battered doors were pulled straight. The engine, silent for too long, shuddered, coughed, and then roared into a rumbling, glorious awakening. The day they finally got it running, the noise shook the garage to its bones. Cole stood by the open hood, his hands braced against the fender, heart hammering harder than it had in years. Sarah whooped, throwing her arms into the air. Lily and June danced in messy, triumphant circles, their laughter ringing like church bells. Ben didn't say a word. He just grinned so wide that Cole feared his face might split in two. The boy climbed into the passenger seat without hesitation, fingers stroking reverently across the cracked dashboard. Cole climbed into the driver's seat, glancing sideways at his son. "You ready, champ?" Ben nodded solemnly. Cole turned the key again. The engine caught immediately this time, settling into a low, throaty purr that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. Outside, Sarah clapped, her eyes suspiciously bright. Cole pulled the Mustang forward, the tires crunching over gravel, a ribbon of dust trailing behind them as they circled the lot. Ben laughed, a rich, full sound, and Cole laughed too, the two of them carving loops of pure joy into the Nevada dust. That night they celebrated the only way they knew how. Cole rigged up old string lights across the garage, the bulbs casting a warm, imperfect glow over the cracked walls and battered workbenches. Sarah found a battered radio that still worked if you hit it just right, and they let it crackle to life, filling the space with old country songs and soft blues. Dinner was simple. Hot dogs roasted over an oil drum fire pit, a heap of baked beans and slices of Mrs. Hadley's famous apple pie she had delivered that afternoon with a wink and a blessing. Ben, Lily, and June danced barefoot on the cool concrete floor, spinning each other around, arms flung wide, faces flushed with laughter. Cole and Sarah sat on the steps, plates balanced on their laps, watching. It would have been easy to believe in that moment that the world outside the garage didn't exist at all, that there was only this light, this laughter, this fragile, stubborn slice of happiness they had carved out for themselves. Sarah nudged Cole with her elbow. "You did it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You brought her back." Cole shook his head. his gaze never leaving the children. "We all did," he said quietly. Sarah smiled, and under the glow of the string lights, it was easy to forget the scars they both carried. For tonight, at least, they were just people who had survived. People who had found each other. People who were, against all odds, building something new. Later, after the kids collapsed into an exhausted, tangled heap of limbs on their cots, Cole lingered outside, the cool night pressing gently against his skin. Sarah joined him after a while, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. She handed one to him without a word and sat down on the steps. They sipped in silence, the stars sprawling across the heavens above them. After a long moment, Sarah spoke, her voice low. "You know," she said, "when I was a little girl, I used to think miracles were big, loud things. Fireworks, angels singing, that kind of stuff." Cole smiled faintly. "And now?" Sarah tipped her head back, studying the sky. "Now I think maybe they're quieter, like a child laughing again, an engine rumbling back to life, or a man who doesn't say much offering you a second chance, without asking for anything in return." Cole felt the words settle deep in his chest, warm and heavy. "You think we're building a miracle?" he asked quietly. Sarah turned to look at him, her eyes shining under the starlight. "I think we already have." The old Mustang sat in the center of the garage, bathed in the soft light of the hanging bulbs. Its paint wasn't flawless. Its lines weren't showroom perfect, but it was alive. And more than that, it was loved. Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out a small square of cloth. It was the red ribbon, now a little frayed, a little faded, but still stubbornly bright. She tied it around the rearview mirror with careful fingers. "For luck," she said, smiling. Cole nodded, too moved to speak. The ribbon fluttered gently in the night breeze, a quiet promise stitched in scarlet thread. "You are not broken. You are not forgotten. You are home." The morning of the county fair broke clear and bright. The sky a flawless stretch of blue that seemed to promise good things. Turner Garage buzzed with nervous excitement. Ben, Lily, and June darted between the Mustang and the workbenches, checking and rechecking everything with the solemnity of astronauts preparing for launch. Sarah knelt by the Mustang's front tire, polishing the chrome hubcap with an old rag, her brow furrowed in concentration. Cole stood by the driver's door, his arms crossed, watching it all unfold. He wasn't much for crowds anymore, wasn't much for parades or contests either. But this wasn't about winning trophies. It was about showing the world, and maybe themselves, that broken things could be made beautiful again. That even in a world that often looked away, some dreams were worth stitching back together with calloused hands and stubborn hearts. By mid-morning they were ready. The Mustang gleamed under the sunlight, the cherry-red paint vivid against the dusty lot. It wasn't perfect. Small dents and old scars still hid beneath the fresh polish. The stars Lily had insisted on painting under the dashboard were invisible unless you knew where to look. But it was alive, and it was theirs. Sarah climbed into the passenger seat, smoothing her hands across the seat covers she and the kids had patched together. Ben buckled himself into the back, the twins flanking him like fierce little bodyguards. Cole slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life, low and steady, and all 3 children let out a cheer that made Cole's chest tighten with something dangerously close to tears. He pulled the Mustang out onto the highway, the tires singing against the asphalt, the red ribbon tied around the rearview mirror fluttering like a battle flag. The county fair sprawled across the dusty fairgrounds just outside town. A chaotic patchwork of tents, booths, hay bales, and colorful banners snapping in the breeze. Families wandered the grounds with lemonade in hand. Children shrieked with laughter on the spinning rides. The smell of kettle corn and fried dough hung thick in the air. Cole parked the Mustang carefully among the lineup of shiny classics and meticulously restored antiques. It didn't take long for the stares to start. Some of the other car owners, mostly older men with meticulously waxed Cadillacs and polished Bel Airs, gave the Mustang long, skeptical looks. Cole caught snippets of whispered conversations. Looks patched together. That paint job's got streaks. Engine's probably held together with duct tape. He felt Sarah stiffen beside him. Felt Ben's small hand slip into his without a word. Cole squeezed it, grounding both of them. Let them talk. They didn't know what it had taken to get here. They hadn't heard the first cough of the engine after years of silence. Hadn't seen a boy smile again after too much sorrow. This wasn't about impressing anyone. This was about them. The judging began in the early afternoon. Cole leaned against the Mustang's hood, arms crossed, while the official, a portly man with a clipboard and a skeptical squint, made his rounds. The man inspected the shiny Cadillacs with approving nods, the vintage trucks with polite smiles. When he reached the Mustang, he paused, ran a hand over the paint, tugged at the door handle, popped the hood. Cole waited, feeling the old familiar knot of defensiveness tighten in his chest. The judge made a few notes on his clipboard and moved on without a word. Sarah let out a breath beside him. The kids waited anxiously, casting nervous glances at the cluster of golden trophies displayed on a nearby table. Cole didn't say anything. He just crouched down in front of them, eye level with the three small faces he loved more than his own life. "You know why this car matters?" he asked quietly. Ben frowned slightly. "Because we fixed it?" Lily guessed. "Because we made it ours," June chimed in. Cole smiled. "Because we didn't give up," he said. "Not when it was hard. Not when it seemed impossible. That's what makes it special. Not how shiny it is. Not how many awards it wins." Sarah knelt beside him, slipping an arm around Lily and June. Ben's eyes shone as he nodded solemnly. When the results were announced, they stood at the edge of the crowd, hands linked, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. The big prizes went, as expected, to the polished Cadillacs and immaculate Corvettes. Cole didn't feel an ounce of disappointment. He looked down at the children's faces, bright, eager, filled with hope, and knew they had already won something far more valuable. Then the announcer, an elderly man with a voice like gravel, cleared his throat. "We have one more award this year," he said, squinting at the crowd over the rim of his glasses. "Something special. An award for heart, for perseverance, for a reminder that sometimes the best things aren't the most perfect, but the most loved." He paused, smiling. "And this year, the best restoration from the heart goes to Turner Garage and their 1967 Mustang." For a moment, none of them moved. Then Ben let out a whoop of pure joy. Lily and June screamed and jumped up and down, grabbing each other's hands. Sarah laughed through her tears, burying her face against Cole's shoulder. Cole just stood there, heart too full for words. They walked up to the small podium together, all five of them, Ben clutching the hand-painted plaque as if it were solid gold. The crowd clapped, and Cole caught more than a few faces smiling with something warmer than politeness. They could see it too now, the magic stitched into every imperfect seam of that car, the miracle that couldn't be polished or bought, the miracle of a broken family, rebuilt stronger at the broken places. As they drove home that night, the sun sinking low and the desert dust rising in lazy golden swirls, Cole caught sight of the rearview mirror. The red ribbon was gone. Sometime during the celebration, it had come loose, lifted by the wind, carried away into the endless Nevada sky. But Cole smiled anyway. They didn't need the ribbon anymore. The miracle wasn't tied to it. The miracle was sitting beside him, giggling in the back seat, leaning against him under the weight of trust and love and second chances. The miracle was here, alive, and it was just getting started. A week after the county fair, Turner Garage buzzed with an energy that felt different from the familiar hum of work. It was hope. It was momentum. It was the knowledge that something special had taken root and was growing stronger with each passing day. Cole wiped his hands on a rag and glanced across the lot where Ben, Lily, and June were chasing each other around the Mustang, their laughter splitting the late afternoon air like music. Sarah leaned against the garage door, a soft smile playing on her lips as she watched them. The plaque they had won at the fair sat proudly on the counter inside, surrounded by a scattering of Polaroids Sarah had pinned up, photos of the Mustang gleaming in the sun, the kids grinning with paint on their cheeks. The dusty garage transformed into something stubbornly beautiful. Cole couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so light, so right. The news traveled fast in a town like theirs. By the middle of the week, more folks started showing up at Turner Garage. A retired couple from the next county over brought an old Ford truck that hadn't run in a decade. A young woman with 2 small boys dropped by, asking if Cole could teach her a few things about keeping her battered minivan alive. Even Mr. Reynolds, who had once sniffed at Cole's junkyard garage, pulled up in a pristine '58 Thunderbird with a hesitant question about a strange knock in the engine. Cole didn't turn anyone away. He just smiled, rolled up his sleeves, and let the kids help where they could. They patched tires, changed oil, replaced batteries. Some jobs they charged for. Most they didn't. Turner Garage had become more than a business. It had become a refuge, a place where second chances weren't just offered. They were built, bolt by bolt, heart to heart. One Saturday morning, as Cole tightened the last bolt on a rusted pickup, a sleek black sedan pulled into the lot. It stood out like a crow among doves, shiny, spotless, city money written all over it. Cole straightened slowly, wary. The driver stepped out, a man in a crisp suit, sunglasses flashing in the bright Nevada sun. He offered a small, professional smile and walked toward Cole, extending a business card. "Cole Turner?" he asked. Cole nodded. "My name's David Langston," the man said. "I represent Mustang Heritage Motors." Cole frowned, wiping grease from his hands. "Mustang Motors?" he repeated, skeptical. Langston chuckled. "Not the big dealership downtown. We're a private restoration company. Word about your work, your Mustang, made its way to us through the county fair. One of our scouts saw it. He said it wasn't just a restoration. It was a story. A story we think people would want to hear." Cole said nothing, unsure where this was going. Langston continued, undeterred. "We're launching a new campaign," he said, excitement creeping into his voice. "Restorations from the heart, real stories, real people. We'd like to feature your garage, maybe even partner with you. You'd stay independent, of course, but we'd provide parts, tools, maybe a little funding to help expand." He paused, letting the words settle. "In short, Mr. Turner, we want to help you keep doing what you're doing, on a bigger scale." For a long moment, the only sound was the cicadas buzzing high in the cottonwoods. Sarah had stepped closer, a rag still in her hand, her expression a careful mixture of hope and wariness. The kids stood near the Mustang, wide-eyed and silent. Cole looked around, at the dusty lot, the battered garage, the children whose laughter had brought the place back to life. He thought of the nights spent under the stars, dreaming of miracles that seemed too big to touch. And then he thought about what Langston had said. Real stories, real people. This wasn't about getting rich. It wasn't about selling out. It was about giving what they had built. A thing born out of dust and pain and fierce, stubborn love. A chance to reach further. to help more people believe that broken didn't mean finished. Cole turned back to Langston, squaring his shoulders. "I'm interested," he said, his voice steady. "But on one condition." Langston raised an eyebrow. Cole glanced at Ben, Lily, June, and then at Sarah. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about them. We built this together. If we're going forward, it's as a family." Sarah's hand found his without hesitation, squeezing tightly. Langston smiled, genuinely this time. "I wouldn't have it any other way." He extended his hand again. This time Cole took it, a simple handshake. But in that moment, standing in the sunlight with dust rising around them and the Mustang gleaming behind them, it felt like something bigger, something permanent. That night, Turner Garage threw a celebration. Mrs. Hadley brought 3 pies instead of 1. Neighbors who had never set foot on the property before wandered in carrying crock pots and lawn chairs. Someone strung new lights across the lot. Someone else pulled out an old guitar. Sarah baked cornbread in the battered oven. Cole grilled hot dogs and hamburgers over the oil drum fire pit. And everywhere, laughter, hope. The fierce, stubborn joy of people who had learned that miracles weren't fireworks or golden trumpets from the sky. Sometimes they were quieter. Sometimes they looked like a boy laughing over engine grease. Like a woman finding her voice again beside an old Mustang. Like a man, battered but not broken, choosing to believe one more time. As the night wore on, Cole stood by the garage door, a mug of lukewarm coffee in his hand, watching it all unfold. Sarah came to stand beside him, her face lit softly by the string lights. "You realize," she said, nudging him with her shoulder, "this is your doing." Cole shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "It's ours." She smiled then, wide, unguarded, radiant. In the middle of the dusty Nevada lot, surrounded by family, friends, and second chances, Cole Turner realized that he wasn't just fixing cars anymore. He was fixing hearts, including his own. The summer bled slowly into fall, the Nevada heat softening into crisp mornings and golden afternoons. At Turner Garage, life found a new rhythm. Steady, warm, stubbornly beautiful. The partnership with Mustang Heritage Motors blossomed not into a corporate machine, but into something far better. A quiet, steady lifeline that let them keep doing what they loved, the way they loved to do it. Each week, new faces appeared on the dusty lot, a single mother looking for a way to keep her old Jeep alive. A veteran restoring the battered pickup his father had left behind. A teenager saving up every cent to fix a rusted-out Camaro for her high school graduation. And every time, Cole, Sarah, Ben, Lily, and June rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Not for money, not for prestige, but because there was something sacred about giving broken things and broken people a second chance. The Mustang, their Mustang, became something of a legend in the county. People came from neighboring towns just to see it, to hear the story of the car built not in some fancy shop, but in a dusty garage where hope had stubbornly refused to die. Ben grew more confident with each passing day, his sketches now covering an entire wall of the office. Blueprints, dreams, ideas too big for just one garage to hold. The twins treated the garage like a kingdom, racing their bikes around the lot, leaving ribbons of laughter in their wake. Sarah found her footing too, not just as Cole's partner, but as the heart of Turner Garage, organizing schedules, managing repairs, even starting a small kids' corner where local children could learn the basics of mechanics. The place pulsed with life, with healing, with love, and yet, amid all the growth, all the noise and dust and dreams, there was something more, something quieter, something that had taken root between Cole and Sarah like a seed planted deep and true. Love, Not the loud, reckless kind that burned out too quickly, but the patient, sturdy kind. The kind that bent under storms but never broke. The kind you built a life around. One crisp October evening, after a long day's work, Cole stood alone in the garage, staring at the Mustang under the string lights. It gleamed softly, the red paint catching the last light of the setting sun. Around him, laughter drifted from the picnic table outside, where Sarah and the kids were playing a messy, giggling game of cards. Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, something he had been carrying for weeks now. A thin band of twisted wire. It wasn't much. No gold, no diamonds. Just a piece of the original Mustang frame, cleaned, polished, shaped carefully by his own hands. Something real, something built to last. He turned it over once in his fingers, then tucked it back into his pocket and stepped out into the twilight. Sarah looked up as he approached, her smile immediate and easy, like she had been waiting for him all along. Cole cleared his throat, nerves jangling in his chest like loose bolts. "Got a minute?" he asked gruffly. Sarah raised an eyebrow but set down her cards. "Always." He led her a little way from the table, to the edge of the lot where the first stars blinked open against the wide velvet sky. For a moment he just stood there, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, gathering the words like tools he wasn't sure how to use. Sarah waited, patient as always. Finally, he pulled out the wire ring and held it up between them. "I know it's not much," he said. "No diamonds, no gold, just this, bent and battered, like me." Sarah's eyes softened, glistening in the starlight. Cole swallowed hard. "But it's strong, and it's real, and it's built from something that survived." He took her hand, his fingers rough and trembling. "I'm not asking for perfect, Sarah," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm just asking for us, for whatever we can build together." For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then Sarah smiled, a smile so full of light and promise that it stole the air from Cole's lungs. She reached out and took the ring, slipping it onto her finger with slow, reverent care. "I never wanted perfect," she said, her voice steady and shining. "I just wanted real." She leaned in then, resting her forehead against his, and Cole closed his eyes, letting the moment settle into his bones like a promise. Behind them, the kids erupted into cheers. Ben leading the charge, Lily and June throwing handfuls of crumpled napkins into the air like confetti. Sarah laughed, a low, joyous sound that wrapped itself around Cole's heart and stitched him back together in all the places he hadn't even realized were still broken. That night, under a sky littered with stars and the faint hum of dreams taking flight, Turner Garage didn't just fix cars. It didn't just mend engines or straighten bent frames. It built miracles. It built a home, a place stitched together with red ribbons and oil stains and second chances, a place where laughter lived, where scars were honored, not hidden, where love grew wild and fierce, strong enough to survive any storm. And as Cole stood there, his arm around Sarah, the children dancing in the dust at their feet, he realized something simple and extraordinary. They hadn't just rebuilt a Mustang. They had rebuilt themselves, stronger at the broken places, wiser for the storms, and endlessly, stubbornly hopeful for the road still ahead. Because home wasn't a building. It wasn't a name on a deed or a number on a mailbox. Home was here, in the heartbeats gathered under these stubborn Nevada stars. Home was them, together, always. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Feel free to share your hometown or your favorite part of the story in the comments below. Your stories and memories inspire us just as much as we hope these stories inspire you. If this story touched your heart, We invite you to subscribe and be part of our growing community, a place where kindness, hope, and second chances are celebrated every day. Thank you for spending your time with us today. It truly means more than words can say. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and keep believing in the quiet miracles all around us.